All
The
right,
rule
Yeah.
Quentin.
breaking. Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier too. Like I was just thinking about all the like people are like, "Whoa, he went and it's not in the order of time." Like
Right.
it's just like
Hello. Welcome to Your Favorite Movie is Racist. I'm Chris.
I'm Tawny.
I'm Miles.
This is a show about movies. In particular, our favorite movies, the movies we really enjoy, the movies that a lot of people consider to be classics, movies that mean a lot to us, that have shaped kind of how we view storytelling in some cases. But they are also movies that have things some might consider problematic. Um, there are elements to them that maybe are outdated, but outdated is probably not the right word. The right word is probably racist. and so that explains the title of the show. This is a show where we dive into what these movies are with a level of nuance. We hope to really kind of spark conversation and continue dialogue through this show and really provide a space for us to just re-explore these movies and in a context that maybe they weren't explored a lot before. With all that said, I think the movie that we chose to talk about today is probably our most overtly talked about movie as far as racism goes. This is a movie that's come up in conversations before. We're not the first ones to address the things going on in this movie, but it is also considered a movie classic. And so we thought it'd be a good time to talk about Pulp Fiction. Um, this is Quentin Tarantino's 1994 film starring John Travolta, Samuel L. Jackson, and like a million other people that you know from everything. And it's probably the movie that truly like jump started Quentin Tarantino's career to where it is now. Obviously, he made Reservoir Dogs before this one, but Pulp Fiction is the one everyone talks about. So I think we'll just start off talking about what we love about Pulp Fiction.
So the year's 1994. I'm a freshman in high school. I don't know, something like that. For whatever reason, like I didn't get to see it in theaters and everyone was talking about it and it made me insane. You know, just speaking for myself as someone who was like a teenager in my most formative sort of, movie year or formative movie years, it's dazzling.
Mm.
And it dazzled critics, it dazzled audiences, people there the consensus, I feel, the popular consensus is that there has never been anything like this. Now that I've seen some of the sort of his source influences, I can say that yes, there actually has been some stuff like that before. But at the time, nobody was making movies that look like this. It's like there's the nonlinear point. There was just, and again, I said this through text as well, but it's pure style.
Yeah, I'd probably say the same. Like, I actually was probably like 7 when this came out, so I don't remember. I remember seeing like as I grew up, I was a kid. There was I don't know if everybody else had this, but I would always see these movie covers. I never saw the movies, but the covers were iconic to me because I saw it so many times, and Pulp Fiction was one of them that I would constantly see that cover of like Uma Thurman, and I was like, What movie is it? I don't know what
Hmm.
that is because I was too young." And then I finally, I don't think I watched the movie until I was like maybe 20 something. I had never seen that movie. I just had always just seen the cover. I seen all this stuff referencing it, and I had like caught little pieces of it, but I never seen the movie. And then when I finally watched it, I was like, "That's it." Like I wasn't blown away when I initially seen it, and at the time, I wasn't someone that was like I didn't really pay attention to films as thoroughly as I do like now. And
Hmm.
then when I revisited and watched it again, I kind of started to see the brilliance of like what was happening, specifically the dialogue. The like you said, it's a very stylish movie, and I feel like this is the movie for the cool kids. Like
Yeah, definitely.
this is
At
yeah,
the
this
time,
is like
yeah.
Mhm.
yeah, it's like all the cool kids that are like non-conformist, like the ones that are
Don't
like
you mean the film?
yeah, the film just the
Not movie. That's for the plebes.
I know, and it's great. It's got some some great performances in there. Like the the thing that stands out to me most is just the dialogue. I love the dialogue in this movie. I don't know how realistic it is,
Yeah.
like that everybody is speaks
So
like
witty.
so
Yeah.
witty.
I mean, really, yeah, like realism and stylization are kind of opposites. So,
Yeah, and
you know.
like I mean that's Tarantino. Like most of his stuff is hyper stylized, so none of it is really realistic anyway, and you kind of got to go in knowing that. But it's like just as far as like a movie that's just innovative for what it was and how stylish it is. I love it. Like it's great for that.
Yeah, I mean, I really love the way he writes dialogue. Because I have a lot of fun with his movies are not boring for the most part. um and I've always thought it'd be interesting if he ever wrote like a stage play or something, because that's what I think of when I think of the way his characters interact. Every line is just adds a layer to the entertainment of it. I have more fun listening to his characters talk to each other than even like in the action scenes, because it's just that's the way he writes is really entertaining, even if it isn't super realistic. Listening to Samuel L. Jackson and his Bible verse, and then him just sort of undercutting it at the end of the movie with like, it's just some cool that I say when
Mhm.
I'm about to
Yeah.
pop somebody, like
Mhm.
just little things that like it almost was like meta commentary before meta commentary was in every movie. Because it was like poking fun at itself in a way. He's like he's like that kid in your film school class who you're like, that dude's gonna do some stuff. He knew all of the storytelling conventions enough to break certain rules and have it
Mhm.
work. Um,
And he's that kid, and he's accordingly arrogant about it.
yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Like
Yeah.
that part of it too. Like the kid who's like, yeah, I
Mhm.
understand this. I understand the structure, but you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go like this, since what I should have gone like that. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
all
The
right,
rule
Yeah.
Quentin.
breaking. Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier too. Like I was just thinking about all the like people are like, "Whoa, he went and it's not in the order of time." Like
Right.
it's just like and it blew our minds. We're dumb. Yeah.
That's the funniest thing is like that's not even the thing that like blew my mind at, and maybe because I saw
You
it
saw it,
too
yeah.
late.
Well, you saw it. You said you were in your 20s, and it was like already maybe 15 years after it came out. Like,
Yeah,
and everything had already kind of trickled out and
and
become,
then
yeah.
non-chronological anyway. I think, but for me though, like the one thing that I think stands out still, like to me, is just again the dialogue. Like I was saying, like when I texted you guys, it's literally like he's literally just spitting like all the most fire bars he possibly
Yeah.
can. Like he's like the rapper that like is trying to say the most like the hottest every line. Like he's not wasting any bars at all. The movie is not necessarily about a lot. It's just that to me stands out more than anything is the amount of thoughtfulness that he put
Mhm.
behind like making these people sound and be the way that they are. It's like that's impressive because
Yeah.
that's not hard. That's not easy to do. Like that's hard
No,
to
yeah,
do.
and I
Like
and I love the comparison to lyrics because I mean, like one of the qualities that makes I think hip hop or rap like successful and memorable and impactful is the play, like the playfulness, the cleverness,
Mhm.
and Tarantino's pure cleverness.
Dun, 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 dun. What is racist about Pulp Fiction?
What isn't racist? No, I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
seriously.
Look,
This scene,
there's a lot
yeah.
of problematic words in this movie. I don't. And this came up in the last episode. Does having those types of words, the slurs, all the racial slurs, all the homophobic, references, all the troubling women characters, like, is seeing those things on film problematic in and of itself, or is it important to sort of look at the way they're dealt with in the movie? And we were talking about this before we started, but like that opening scene, Tim Roth just dropping offensive slurs like bombs, and I had forgotten about a lot of that. And then the rest of the movie, I was kind of trying to keep track of it, and I'm looking at my insane notes over here, but it, at the very least, you can say it does feel intentional. Though the question is like, what's the intention?
It just makes me wonder, like, what his interpretation of, people are, because most of the characters he writes are like filthy people. Like, they're the worst kind of people that on a daily basis you don't probably run into. But he seems to tend to gravitate to them. Obviously, they're interesting because, most of the characters he has, whether they're, problematic or not, like they have very colorful personalities. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if his gravitation to them is just because they're interesting or is saying something about his perception of what he thinks, of America or the world that we live in, because the characters he has, like, these people are horrible. These are terrible people. Like, everyone in this is terrible.
Think for me, that opening sequence is establishing, like, I think it's very intentionally establishing or to um, desensitize us to what these
Mm,
characters are. Because when you open with that, everything else you hear after it becomes just part of that world in a way. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's intentional. I think a lot of things he does are very intentional, which is why, to me, um, there is like a problem with the fact that certain choices are are hard to interpret, because
Mm-hmm.
just about everything else in the movie to me is very easy to interpret. Like, it's not a movie that requires you to kind of think on seven different levels. To me, like, it's like you watch it, you get what the arc of each character is meant to be, you get why people ended up where they ended up, you get, like, that's all pretty well conveyed. And so then when you have a movie where, in the third act, all of a sudden the director pops in and says "dead nigger" like 50 times, you're like, wait a minute, why did that need to be there? What is the goal of writing this Jimmy character this way? Is it
And
because you want us to not like Jimmy? Um, if so, good job. But
why write that character when we look at how intelligent the rest of the dialogue is? It's so strange that that's what you would go to. Like, this is a masterpiece in
yeah,
writing. That's such a cheap way to make me dislike somebody. It's like, that's it. Like, and I guess maybe it's not satisfying coming from someone who seems so brilliant, the way they write everything else. Because even like the entire movie, like, as you were talking, it was making me think like the movie itself is almost a metaphor or a mirror, like being held up to what society actually is that we don't want to accept that it is. Like, these
mm-hmm,
people are
mm-hmm,
in our country and they talk like this on a daily basis. They're doing stuff behind. There's all types of just crazy, and you see it now more. There's documentaries on, Jeffrey Epstein and all this other. It's like,
there you
this
go.
dude's got a whole island where he's taking little girls to it. Like, these people exist in our society, and I think maybe that's what makes it even more polarizing is in 1994 to hold a mirror up to America and say, this is what we actually look like. we talk like this on a daily basis. Let's not pretend like we don't talk like this. Let's not.
Hmm.
I literally got like bombarded by some. I don't. Trump wasn't in office at the time, but she was one of those types of
Yeah.
like where she came up and she was mad I was on her street and she started going in about immigrants taking our country away and all this stuff. She just got on this soapbox of just blatant racism. Like to me, like she didn't want me there, and then so she just started taking it out on everybody. And it was like she reminds me so much of the couple at the beginning in the diner. That's how I would
Yeah.
imagine she speaks to her significant others. That's how they talk. I guess maybe there are people that gratuitously just use like because it just that's how they talk, like, you know, and they're
Yeah.
white and it's like, yeah, this is just normal for
You
me.
know, the Jimmy thing, well, that's his character, his character in the movie. I do wonder though, like, is it because we talked about this in regards to the scene in The Shining, like where when people use that word, it often is a signal that they're a bad person.
Hmm.
Like, I don't know if I got the impression, or like it was my impression that Jimmy was a bad guy,
Right.
in that scene. Like, I thought it was a little, and that's what sort of is the uncomfortable piece.
Yeah.
You know, like if it were clear, or if it did feel like, because he's helping our sort of, not our protagonist, because it's not exactly that kind of movie, but like these two really central characters
Hmm.
that are sort of the main two characters that you think of when you think of this movie. He helps them. He's kind of a dick about it,
Yeah.
but ultimately he's helping him. And I read too, that like his wife in the movie, the Bonnie they keep referring to, she's black and she's a nurse. And I read that like that got written in to sort of soften the blow of that scene so that he wouldn't seem like such a
Well,
complete,
right.
you know.
But it's so funny to me that it's like instead of not saying that word,
Yeah.
you just
No,
say,
he's
but his
like,
wife's black. Like, don't say the word.
I
Like,
was watching the scene and I was like, it's like he's like a little baby in a pool, like splashing in the N word. Like he's just
right.
like, and like
Yeah,
they're
that's the thing
just,
too.
it's
His
gleeful. It's like this gleeful, like, and then like early on, one of his sort of defenses when Spike Lee came at him about, and that was about Jackie Brown, was like, well, it's about realism. And as we've discussed, this is not a person who deals in realism. And so
right.
that's kind of a weak, and then it was like, well, he said something about, you know, basically like, you know, no word should have that much power. And I'm gonna take that down. And I'm just like, I don't like, is that your job? Like, is that how you can be most useful?
Yeah, but why
Fight your fight.
that's such a lame cop out and like justification using it though, because you have an infatuation with the word nigga. Like you just
it's
do. You could be real,
it's
like you said.
it's clear.
You could say you're dealing in realism. Like, okay, well, let's be real then. You have an
Mhm.
obsession with that word. Like, if we're being honest,
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily bother me the most when I'm watching his movies, but it is something that I'm like, man, what is up with this dude? Like, why do you keep doing that so much? Like, because
He
it
likes
wouldn't
it
bother
almost
me.
as much as he likes feet.
Yeah, seriously, feet niggas. Like that's like what a Tarantino movie and blood, a lot of blood.
Somebody make that, please make that movie poster. I want
Yeah,
to see it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, I don't think it is meant to be like, let's paint him as a villain. Because one, so many characters get their comeuppance within the context of the movie, and if you're gonna say, okay, I'm gonna write this scene and paint this character as a jerk, and then have him say, "Nigger," like then in that same context, you would write something into the scene where he gets checked in some way. One thing
Hmm.
that really, one thing that really stood out to me was that, and bothered me more, was that Jules is so like is pleading with him so kindly and is so like
Hmm.
acquiescent to him
Like
like no
placating.
Jimmy, you know, no, but then in
Hmm.
the same scene he's talking to Marcellus, who is within the context of the movie. The very first scene opens up painting Marcellus as this like kingpin. When Jules talks to him on the phone, Jules is so disrespectful to him. And he's like, I need to hear that you're gonna take care of this, right? Like, and in my head, it's like, don't you work for him? Like, why is Jules so acting this way towards Marcellus, who has been painted as the toughest dude in the whole movie, but then like completely bowing down to this nerdy white kid because of their situation. Like it just and all they needed was the space, right?
Hmm.
Like Marcellus is the one taking care of things, calling the wolf and doing all that stuff. Marcellus is the one that you're in trouble with if anything goes wrong. You know what I mean? It's just weirdly written to where this same character who isn't scared of anybody is the only scene where he's like literally kind of bowing down in a way is when it's to Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah,
Um,
it's uncomfortable. That scene,
yeah,
that's for that reason, because you can hear the tone change in Samuel L. Jackson's voice
right.
when he's talking about his coffee, and it's just it's such performance, and it's uncomfortable, and it's purely in the context of the narrative for the benefit of making. Let's not even call him Jimmy. Let's just call him Quentin Tarantino because that's basically who's in there. Like of
Hmm.
making him feel good and giving him this sort of space to play around with this word that he loves to play with, and it like he loves it. And maybe Samuel L. Jackson says it more. Maybe I'm not sure. I was reading a bunch of like people have done research on the number of times and which characters use that word the
Hmm.
most and which characters swear the most. But
Hmm.
it's like, but yeah, like why? What was the purpose of that? Of the whole dead, dead N word. Like
Yeah,
what
yeah.
other than just
I
this
think
moment where he gets to say that word over and
I
over again?
I think it was a I think it was a failed attempt at comedy.
I guess we got to
Um,
mention the rape part. Like
yeah,
that's pretty
Do
like
we? Yeah.
glaring. Like
this is another one of those things too because the racial
Hmm.
element, right? Like um, they just it's just inserted there in places where it doesn't even need to be, just to like
Hmm.
beat you over the head with the fact that this is a racist shop owner and this is a racist cop. But like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like and then they of course they rape the biggest black guy in the movie and sort of try to
And that's very.
uh-huh. And then Butch saving him,
Hmm.
who is one of the more reprehensible characters in the movie, and it's like, oh, this is Butch's arc to save Marcellus and then get
Hmm.
off the hook for it. Um, just yeah, that sequence was like my son after he was like that part was weird. I was like, yeah, that's one way to put it.
he has a tendency of being very heavy handed when it comes to this type of stuff. Like he goes too far a lot, right? He's just the kid that you're playing with, and then they always just do something like they get too rough, like when you're wrestling and now somebody's bleeding or something.
He is
he's
that
just
kid.
he's that kid. It's like, dude, you play too much. Like he's that kid. Like, and it's like I just don't understand like some of the choices where the to go off into the deep. It listen, I get it. It's shocking. It's provocative. It's like you said, the opening scene, he's sort of disarming you immediately to let you know you don't know what you're in store for. You have no
Mhm,
clue where I'm going to go, but this is where I'm starting. So you know it could only go crazier than
Hmm.
this or
mhm.
stay at this level. So I guess maybe it's not a huge shocker, but it's so I don't like seeing rape scenes in general, like in movies. They just make me uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Just seeing
Yeah, it's
someone, yeah,
horrible.
just seeing someone, completely helpless, just kind of having their entire
Mhm.
humanity stripped from them is just troubling. Let alone a man doing it to another man, let alone a white racist guy
Cop.
doing it to a demasculating, like
Hmm.
this huge black. I mean, Ving Rhames that's a big dude. Like that
Yeah.
dude is
Hmm.
huge. Like so to see it be in that circumstance as well is even more unsettling. It's like I know I'm not supposed to enjoy this anyway, but I have issues with it. Not only do I not enjoy it, I struggle to see the relevance or importance of it.
I would never. I like. There might be some context in which that makes for an effective statement about something, but it's really not about anything. As we've discussed, like there's not a bigger theme that's being pointed to, and so it feels. I mean, it feels especially gratuitous because if it's because it's only style, and so if it's, I guess if it's only style that's important, why does it have to be again like a white cop raping a large black man?
I don't know anybody that likes that scene. If you do, that's weird. That's a weird scene to like. But like,
I'm secretly judging you.
You know,
yeah, there's nothing to really like about this scene. Even when you try to throw humor in there, I'm just kind of like, yeah, nah, that dude is still getting raped in the background. No, like it's still
Like,
like,
yeah, it's not okay.
yeah. So it's, yeah. Go
And
ahead.
the characters' races all kind of, we can say that Marcellus, well, and there's nothing about his race that's integral to the character, but that's the problem, is that there isn't anything integral about his race to the character, but you chose to cast Ving Rhames and have that be what happens. Okay, well, I think we've said enough about the racism of Pulp Fiction. It's prevalent. Like, this isn't a you gotta kind of read between and discover the racism in this one. Like, nah, it's
Nah,
like a
it's
white
right there.
dude wrote the
It's,
word nigga 75 times. Like,
yeah,
what?
it's right there in your face in your living room on your couch with you, like
Right.
watching it with you. Like,
It's a big Italian guy with the
right.
word racism on his
Right.
As y'all know, if you've watched the first two episodes, we're pretty fluid about our rating system in that we don't have one. So, like,
not
we're really
exactly.
not exactly. I mean, it's an art, not a science. You know what I mean?
We're tinkering.
We're tinker, we're tinkering, we're tinkering the way Tarantino tinkered with the word. I I don't often feel compelled to watch Pulp Fiction. And when we were texting, I said, like, when I rewatched it last night, I was like, I forgot how incredibly well made this movie is, but I hadn't forgot about the racism. And I think that is telling. Like, the fact that I remember that stupid Tarantino scene like more easily than I remember the adrenaline shot scene, which is just a brilliantly composed scene, tells me that it affected me to sit and watch that and hear that, and it tells me that I question the purpose behind it, whereas I don't question the purpose behind a lot of the other choices in the movie. I question the purpose behind that scene, the Marcellus rape scene. I question those things because I was like, what are you trying to tell me through this? And then for me, it doesn't sit on the classic with a conversation, and it doesn't sit on the high art necessarily thing either. For me, it probably sits in the place of um, maybe you should watch it once,
Yeah.
just so you
Yeah.
can say you've seen it.
I think what you said about like I don't feel compelled to watch it. It's been a long time since I've seen it actually. Though as I noted, I grew up, I was like a teenager. Reservoir Dogs is 1992, but I didn't see that until I was in high school, like a few years later. And I was obsessed with Reservoir Dogs, like obsessed. But even that one, I don't feel compelled to watch as much anymore as I did when I was in my early 20s. Pulp Fiction was a big deal, and as I said, like it was a big part of, I was discovering myself as somebody who's like a movie person, and it was like the cool movie that everybody was seeing and talking about, and so it'll always be important and memorable for those reasons. It's influential, it's incredibly stylish, it marked the beginning of somebody with a pretty impressive career and who I think has honed his art. But I don't feel the need to watch it.
There's this Jay-Z line where I can't even remember the song, like, but he's talking about, would you rather be underpaid or overrated? And
Oh, that's
like,
hard.
when I think about this movie, it's wildly, successful, like it, in terms of like people gravitating to it, and it got nominated for Oscars and everything. And I guess that's what you want, right? Like when you put out a movie, you want that level of success. Like it would suck. This seems like one of those movies that would come out and everybody would hate it and not understand. And then, 20 years later, it'd be like, oh, yeah, yeah, now we like it. And like for that reason and many more, to me, it is a very overrated film. But I guess that's the conflict. I guess as being a filmmaker, would you rather be overrated or nobody give a shit about your movie? So,
Hmm.
in a sense, I guess it's a good thing that it is so highly revered, and because it did open the door for like what we talked about. Kubrick is responsible for some filmmakers that we love today, and so is Tarantino. Like, there's definitely quite a few directors that I like now that ate from that tree,
And
and
that was when, yeah, when indie films got real big too, was kind of, he
exactly.
made that, he was
He
a
made
big
it
part of
cool.
that.
He made
Yeah.
it cool to be an indie film director. So it's like, well, I mean, it is overrated as hell to me. I don't think this is even his best movie,
Yeah.
let alone in the pantheon of just great movies in general. I don't rank it necessarily as high as, and I'm probably gonna get destroyed for this, but I just don't rank it as high. But I, like you said, I have no reason to really watch this that often. I've been saying this for a while. Like I just think I think it's good. It's masterful in a lot of different ways, and then it's underwhelming in a lot of other ways too. Like it's not the greatest film ever. It's not the worst film ever, and for that, like I don't know, like I watched it for the purpose of this podcast, but I don't know. I'll probably watch Pulp Fiction again in like 3 years or something. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know. I just never need to watch that movie, and I never actually want to watch it.
I mean, if you're a completionist and you're like, "Hey, I really like Tarantino," then yeah, you're gonna end up watching this and the other ones that have. But it's like if you came to somebody and said, "Hey, I'd like some Tarantino, but hold the racism," then you could watch like,
Another
oh yeah,
director.
okay, right. It's like, yeah, that doesn't exist, homie.
I
Good.
like,
Uh,
oh
Yeah.
man, go watch some Steven Spielberg.
yeah, right,
You know.
right. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for joining us. Please jump into the comments, subscribe, engage in this dialogue with us. Let us know what you think of Pulp Fiction. If we are completely wrong and you're like, nah, bro, that's the best movie ever. Like, I don't care if he says 100 more times, it's still the best movie ever. Then let us know in very kind words, please. But this is how we feel, and we will see you next week.